think we probably are just going live here. And Jessica has just joined us. Matt.
All right, everyone, we're going to go live.
Thanks, Nicole. All right, Tom. July meeting of the Commission on the Environment. Would you like to do roll call?
I will indeed like to do roll call. First, we'll start Chris Kahn. I think you just need to be present. All right.
Present.
Jessica Crawford.
Present.
Ann Earhart.
Present.
Cheryl Schmidt.
Present.
Michael Townley.
Present.
I can also see your faces, but Cliff Walls.
Present.
Audrey Yonkis, I believe, is not present. And same with Janine Camarillary. And I am also present, Tom Alwyn. So has everyone had a chance to take a look at the agenda for today?
Yes.
Anyone have any comments? I can make a quick one. We need, as I'm not sure if Kathy, if everyone heard Kathy say we need to move kind of quick. Today we have to be done by 6:30 as the Zoom channel has another meeting coming up. So any other comments or questions about the agenda? All right. I think we need to get a motion to approve the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Any opposed? All right. Approved. And so we move now to the minutes from the last time we met way back in February. Has everyone had a chance to take a look at the minutes? Any comments or changes that need to be made? I didn't notice any. That's a long time ago for me to remember back to, so.
It does seem like forever ago.
Yeah. So do we have a motion to approve the minutes? Or yeah, we need to approve those.
A motion to approve minutes.
Ann making the motion, and I didn't catch the second.
Agreed.
I think it was Cliff.
Cliff? Okay.
Sure.
Was it Cliff?
I think I did the first one, but we talked at the same time. It doesn't matter. I second.
All right. All right. All in favor of approval?
Aye.
Aye.
In opposition? So approved. So next in our agenda is to get communication from citizens. Do we have anyone else on the line right now?
We need to adopt the, we need to approve the adoption of the time limit first before you take public comment.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if no one was on, if we needed to go through that process.
This will,
We have one attendee.
Oh, we do. Okay, good.
so it'll also take us through for future electronic meetings. So
This
will
one time.
cover our future meetings as well.
Okay, very well. Sorry.
No worries.
So it's been recommended that for these online meetings, we adopt a 2-minute maximum time period for individuals to make comments. And so I have a recommendation that in order to maintain the order of an online public meeting, move to adopt a rule pursuant to MCL 15.263(1), limiting public comment at this meeting to 2 minutes per individual. And so I make that motion.
I'll move.
Cheryl has a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? All right, we have adopted a 2-minute time limit. And that handles future ones as well, correct, Kathy? Okay,
Correct.
good.
Wait, does that only handle future ones online, not in person?
This is for electronic meetings held by the commission.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, good clarification.
Yes, excellent clarification.
All right, and we have one caller on the line. John, if you'd like to address council or the commission, you are now permitted to speak.
Hello, this is John Gentilozzi representing 3400 West Road, and I'm here to speak on the permit application for 3401 Coolidge Road. And I'm glad to answer any questions on that application when the time comes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Welcome. So let's move into the review of the wetland permit application for 3401 Coolidge Road. Has everyone had a chance to look through? Kathy, do you want to give a quick synopsis, wrapping up 54 pages in a few moments?
In about 60 seconds? Sure. No.
Sure.
You've had most of the application materials for a while now because this review originally was to come to you in June. There was a last minute letter submitted by the developer prior to that meeting that required a response from our wetland consultant, which you have as well. And last week on June 15th, we also received a second letter from the developer's wetland consultant, Stephen Boyce, responding to our wetland consultant's response. But basically, what I would like to point out is that in the final response letter that the developer has provided to you, the very last paragraph does offer a solution to the situation that we found where we had requested one-for-one mitigation. It seemed a reasonable, according to our wetland consultant and according to past reviews, it seemed a reasonable approach for this project, given that the city's goal is to have no net loss of wetlands. For those of you who've been involved in these reviews previously, one-for-one is a very low threshold for us, actually. We've done 1.5 to 1, we've done 2-for-1, we've done mitigation plus conservation easements before, but our wetland consultant had also praised this developer for the way that they cited the development and some of the changes that they made to their site plan in order to minimize the wetland disturbance. And so we thought that that was a reasonable response for mitigation. However, the developer was not in favor of mitigation at all. And we were kind of at a standstill there until this last paragraph that is suggesting that they purchase wetland bank credits in the same amount as we were asking for. So that's the consideration right now on the table, and I would love to have you ask questions of the developer and possibly me as well in terms of the way we've handled these historically and your understanding of how we handle this from an ordinance perspective. I think that there's room to have some discussion here on this.
I have a question. What would the one-for-one look like in this example, in this specific example?
In this property, so this property has an upland area that our wetland consultant, based on her letter, thought to be very ripe for mitigation and for creating that wetland. The concern seems to be from the developer, and John can speak to this himself, that that the development, that land is being considered for development as well. And so they would not be interested in doing mitigation or increasing wetland in that area because of that.
I wonder if this would be a good time for John to provide a summary to that effect, maybe address the their perspective that This parcel was, they don't want to pursue restoration of the wetlands due to future development plans, and or, you know, the kind of the feasibility aspect or lack of feasibility aspect of that, since, you know, that's kind of a consideration.
Yes, sir, I'd be glad to, and thank you for the opportunity. So the upland in question in the reports that we have received has been unspecified in its location. However, the consultant did seem to clarify in their second letter that it was the consultant's impression, and it's unclear if she also made it the city's impression, that the land on Coolidge was never scheduled for development. To which I would say the available documentation is profoundly in favor of us as the applicant always considered that land for development. We've been the subject at this point, I think it's 6 public notices regarding the rezoning and lot splitting, several public hearings, multiple traffic reports, and even the materials included within our JPA application clearly state where there is a property line and it says proposed property line. The ASTI, the city's consultant, can opine as to what we might be able to do with that land in any way they wish, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that land is, you know, freely available for wetland mitigation. It's not how we view the land, and certainly based on recent property sales around us, vacant developable land in the northern tier has a value of about $4 per square foot. So using that land directly for mitigation is not something that's of interest to us. And we believe that the bank method of wetland mitigation has several features that make it, you know, certainly better than mitigating on site. Obviously, number one, for us, it doesn't require the use of any more land. And I would, you know, I'm pleased that that ASTI believed that we did a good job on this site. We worked very hard on this site. And I would also bring up at this point that Eagle, you know, when they were reviewing our JPA application, did not ask for any on-site mitigation. In fact, they were the first to suggest using the bank method. We declined to use the bank method at the Eagle stage of the permit because it wasn't required based on mitigation wasn't required based on the extent of our impact and the history of Eagle's decisions to not require mitigation below 1/3 of an acre. So Eagle never intended for us to mitigate on site. We, you know, while we don't necessarily have a problem with mitigation at this point, we have a problem mitigating on site, most certainly. But the next thing that the mitigation bank provides is essentially immediate wetland, and it's a 100% chance of success. It's a currently functioning wetland. So there is no, you know, if we mitigate on site, there's a 5-year review period. The site may or may not become a wetland. Now, certainly, as ASTI stated in their letter, they believe there's a high probability of it based on the soils map, but the soils map is only one portion of what may be possible on the site. So we think that the mitigation bank offers us the best opportunity to replace immediately our impacts that have been created for this project.
I just add that it's my understanding that the state, you know, in terms of less than 1/3 of wetland impacts, then mitigation becomes it's discretionary decision. So it's kind of up to them as to whether they waive that requirement. But of course, the city can be more restrictive than that.
And the city is so in its ordinance has the choice, especially in the goal of no net loss of wetlands. That is one of the ways to get at that. Also consider in the ordinance that the wetland bank credits, while allowed through the ordinance, are not in the same watershed as the property, as I mentioned in your email, that they are in the same ecoregion. And usually this is a consideration that's taken when there really isn't any other option available on the site.
I guess, so I have a question. So was there no actual, like anyone actually going out to perform and see if there is any possible mitigation on site? I know that there was that online tool that kind of referenced like, well, this says that it's highly able to be restored, but has anyone actually gone out and checked to see that, if that's even a possibility?
So Jessica, our wetland consultant did the on-site.
Okay.
inspection. Yeah,
And then they did find that it was,
that was part of.
okay.
Yeah, that was all part of her findings based on her on-site investigation. I'm not sure about whether John's consultant was on-site or not.
Okay.
I would say that my consultant has been on site previously, not during this round, though I would debate that ASTI identified any locations that would be of suitable soil conditions to create new upland, or if they did not specify those locations other than available upland. So they didn't say, we believe that this area is suitable for wetland restoration. It was just some of the available upland on site must be suitable for restoration because of what the state of Michigan map says. It was not based on my field findings dictate that wetlands could be placed in this location.
So it looked like there was a little bit of disagreement occurring between the consultants there. Obviously, there was some mapping that was used to perform some analysis and analysis of historical wetlands being present there through, prior imagery. I mean, that's pretty common to kind of use as a screen, but I think the city's consultant did say in their experience that this would be, highly likely to be a good candidate for a restoration site. But yeah, noted that there was some, obvious disagreement between the consultants there.
I would just also note that our consultant would generally not be in the business of choosing a specific site for mitigation. That would really be something that we would expect the developer to say, we understand this is a good area for mitigation. We would suggest this particular area out of these acres, or this portion of a parcel. So we would expect that kind of back and forth in a negotiation, and they wouldn't necessarily specify this exact plot of land would be where you'd want to put it.
And as we've stated in our JPA application and subsequent to that in our letters, we don't believe there is suitable upland on the site for restoration.
I guess, is it not suitable, or is it not practical given, I guess, the trade-off of the valuable land?
I would argue that the statute doesn't make a differentiation between whether it's suitable upland or whether a prudent landowner would allow mitigation to occur in those areas. Whether there is mitigation space available is not necessarily the sole driver. Would a prudent landowner do that? And I would argue in this case that no, a prudent landowner would not give away developable land in order to accomplish mitigation when there are other suitable means of mitigation available.
So I think you're citing the statute. You mean the state statute, or are you also referring to the city's ordinance?
I'm referring to both, and really the city's ordinance is largely what falls out of the state ordinance allowing cities to regulate wetlands. Many of the same decisions, many of the same triggers are there in the city's statute and in the state statute. So I don't make a lot of differentiation between, aside from the mitigation requirement, I don't really make a lot of differentiation between consideration of a wetland over 2 acres in size at the city level and at the state level in terms of its, the things that are required to get a permit, the feasible and prudent alternatives. All of those things exist in very similar methods between the state and the city.
So what are the alternatives for mitigation if they aren't on that site? I mean, just some examples, just so I understand what wetland mitigation would look like on another site.
I think wetland mitigation within the wetland bank is a fairly simple process. You know, we hand over a check and we then have the ability to use that portion of the wetland bank as mitigation. And that's pretty standard practice. And I would add that the state has encouraged that practice with a number of landowners. And I can't say why necessarily, but the fact that it becomes, you know, there is no monitoring period, there's no high chance of success. It's 100% successful every time. There are other mitigation strategies. For example, the American Board of Emergency Medicine owned another piece of property that was suitable for essentially turning into a conservation easement, which does count as mitigation in that case. But beyond that, short of doing it on site, purchasing a bank credit or purchasing a piece of property that could be mitigated within the same watershed or within the same ecoregion, those are really the only options that are permitted.
I'm not familiar with the mechanics of what this body is supposed to do here. Like, what do we, Kathy, do we make like a motion just to say we approve this, or, you know, whatever? Just curious, like what is like needed logistically?
Correct. Yeah. So Cliff, I don't know if you were here. The most recent project was the SkyNet project, and that particular project, the commission decided on a contingency that they put in place. So that is an option. You know, you can say we do approve this as a mitigation strategy on this project, and we will allow for the purchase of these wetland bank credits. That's an option. Someone can make a motion for that. You can then discuss that motion and understand where everyone's coming from. You could make a different motion if someone has thoughts in a different direction, and you could have that discussion also. And you can apply contingencies to any motion that you wish that may come out of your discussion of this.
I have another question for John, if that's okay. I do want to, you know, let other people ask questions. I don't want to commandeer all the time. So, John, just wondering, is this kind of, I guess, the best offer you think right now in terms of compromise? You know, I appreciate that there's like, you know, kind of a compromise offer out there, but is this kind of as much as the developer is willing to offer at this time?
At this time, yes, it is. And we do believe that it's the best option for this site, given, you know, given what's out there about it, and given what we feel is possible from this site. We feel like the wetland bank is the best option.
Hmm.
So is there no wetland credits available in the Looking Glass watershed?
I would have to look more. The Gunnell Farms wetland bank is in the same ecoregion. You know, certainly we could attempt to find some in the Looking Glass. From the state of Michigan's sort of compilation of wetland banks, I didn't see one that was any closer. We are matching the same ecoregion, and it's difficult to tell the map that's provided with it. You would have to be an Ingham County expert to know whether we're exactly in the right spot or if we're adjacent to it. But I do believe that the drainage network that we connect to from this wetland would be in that ecoregion.
You know, I guess I'll just echo that concern, kind of connected to that question that seems to be a point of emphasis is, that this is getting outside the watershed. And so the benefit, the no net loss is kind of, are we keeping the benefit, the spirit of the city's ordinance, are we keeping that kind of intact here?
I don't see where what we have proposed isn't within the watershed.
So did I get that incorrect then? Is it not within the same watershed? It's not in the same watershed, right? That's correct.
Understanding is that it is not in the same watershed, but it is in the same ecoregion.
Okay,
Kathy has, my turn?
go ahead.
Kathy, has the city done this type of thing in the past? Has this worked well? I guess that would be my greater concern is the city going to be happy with all of this?
I believe this is going to be our first where a mitigation is purchased through Wetland Bank credits.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I lean sort of where Chris and Jessica are in that, stepping out into a different watershed seems to be the only sticky point I have with it. I don't have a problem with the banking idea or the concept. It's just that we're sort of, we're not, the state looks at it from the state's perspective, which is big, and wetland banking anywhere in the state works for the state, but we're the city. And now we're going to be banking somewhere, that isn't within not just the city, but even the wetlands, the wetland that the impact is happening in. So, that would be my, stick with this one is that we're moving maybe too far away. It's becoming it's a broad scale move. So if there is an option that's within the watershed that the impact is happening, that would be where I would see no issue at all. And I don't even know that I see a huge issue with this one. It's just sort of a small issue for me.
Sir, reviewing the Michigan Eagle Wetland Bank Registry, there are no credits available within a bank that would be accessible to a private developer. The Michigan DOT does have credits available, but Michigan DOT will not pass out credits to private developers. They're used for highway projects so that the highway, if it impacts a wetland, they can basically buy credits from themselves. Pardon me. And the Livingston County Road Commission also has a bank that would be possible, but again, is a road commission and unlikely to be available to private citizens. Unfortunately, the Wetland Bank program, despite having 42 sites available, just does not have what we need at this time. However, as I say, we're right on the border between two watersheds, and I would even, perhaps I could trace the path of the Remy-Chandler drain to its termination and find that the Remy-Chandler drain, which accepts the water from this site, in fact, is in a different watershed.
I don't know, just kind of brainstorming here, but though it's not mitigation, though it's not restoration, I think one legal mechanism that's really nice for protecting wetlands is conservation easements of existing wetlands, because it's a perpetual protection of wetlands and it runs with the deed of the land. So, I don't know if there'd be any consideration of, protecting any existing wetland resources that the developer currently has in this watershed, putting it into perpetual conservation easement. I mean, I'm just, talking your ideas, but it's a nice vehicle for protecting wetland resources in perpetuity.
We certainly have not yet looked at that avenue, but I would again sort of back up to, we aren't necessarily required to look at that option. I mean, certainly that could be one part of our mitigation plan, and I would say that, of course, anything is possible, but it's not one that we've considered as of yet. There are obviously some other things that can go along with a conservation easement, which have to be thought through before you can commit to that sort of thing.
So this would be an option that you have not explored. So something because in the ordinance, it really does state, when other options have been exhausted, to consider those wetland bank credits. But this is not an option that has been considered. It is an option that we have had in other developments and other projects.
And the protection of wetlands is encouraged, but not necessarily a permitted way to mitigate, I would say.
I'm wondering, because I know that you guys have already kind of tried to come with a compromise with the city, and I'm wondering if there's an even further compromise to make, like if there's any possibility to do more than 0.008 acres of mitigation, even if it's not the 0.24. I guess I'm just wondering, is there any possibility to increase that further and then do the rest as maybe the wetland credit? So then it's, it's just not, it's not sacrificing as much on the wetland loss in the city.
I would point out that 8,000th of an acre that you're referring to is an activity within a wetland to remove a historically placed culvert. So it's only a matter of doing something to help restore the function of the wetland that we did as part of the permit. It certainly isn't necessary to our permit, but at the end of the day, we stand on the idea that we've offered here a mitigation proposal that we think should be satisfactory. We were told very early on as far as it pertains to mitigation. And in fact, the state's very clear on this in their rules. Enhancement of existing wetlands is not considered mitigation. It's certainly a good thing for the wetlands, but it doesn't have any bearing on mitigation.
So I guess that doesn't really answer my question though. Is there any opportunity to offer further mitigation on the site?
No, I don't. I'm sorry that I didn't directly address your question, but no, I don't think there is opportunity to offer mitigation on the site. We don't believe that the mitigation on site is suitable, and that 8,000ths of an acre isn't mitigation. That's merely restoration of an existing wetland that was never offered as mitigation. We appreciate ASTI's consideration that could be accounted against our restoration credit or our mitigation, but we don't believe in, that's, pardon me, the reason that we offered 0.248 was actually to restore that 8,000th of an acre to the 0.24 of an acre that was requested initially in the mitigation. I think properly our numbers should be actually 0.237 acres of mitigation, but we went with the rounded up number of 0.24 and then added back that 8,000ths because that can't be considered mitigation. Only actual mitigation can be considered that. So we brought the 8,000ths of an acre back into our offer just to fully mitigate all impacts on the site.
Further questions for John about this site? John, this is a site that is going through the process of being split into 4 parcels altogether. Is that correct? If you include the 3400 West Road with the 3401 Coolidge Road?
Yes, that is correct. And that process is now complete. We received city council approval during the last meeting. We are one of the business items on that last meeting. So we did receive city council approval for both site plans, the lot split, and the rezoning at the previous meeting.
Of those properties, as you look to the future for development, do you anticipate that there will be wetland disturbance that you'll be coming back to this commission for review again?
At the moment, we don't believe that we will need additional wetland permitting on that parcel. Once the state performed their wetland identification, we found ourselves under an expanded delineation. I mean, we gained, versus any of the other delineations that we had done by private consultants, we gained more than a half acre of wetland after the state's delineation. And so in our rezoning studies, in our rezoning traffic studies, we submitted the building size that we believe would fit on the available upland without further wetland impact. So we are aware of where the wetlands are, and we've schemed our future development around not impacting those wetlands, which will probably mean another subsurface detention system at considerably more cost than the above ground systems that could otherwise be used.
Have any of the other commission members been past that property? I live literally a block away from that plot of land. It's got this thick black soil. It's looks like it's a troublesome place to build with a lot of water and a lot of vegetation, but just sidebar.
I drive by it every day to pick up my kids from daycare. So it's the area is familiar to me, but the thick black soils, it sounds like hydric soils to me.
We're comfortable with the delineation at the moment that Eagle has provided for that. And, you know, had they found additional wetland in that area, I can assure you that they would have flagged it. You know, we certainly were surprised at the increase in the amount of wetland. You know, black soil though it may be, if you were to walk across the wetland that's adjacent to Coolidge Road, I would challenge anyone to point out the difference between where the wetland started and stopped. So I think we've been accurately described by the state WIP program.
I guess I'll just add one more comment. Kind of my final comment is, I think it's, you know, in reviewing the extensive materials and overall, I appreciate John being here to answer these questions and taking the time to do that. Overall, in reviewing the materials, I do think it's a little disappointing that the developer's consultant appears to have carried a lot of negative history into this application process. They spent a lot of time focusing on being critical of the city's review of other projects. So that's not necessarily helpful, you know, for this specific review and approval. But that being said, you know, I think the proposal to purchase mitigation banking credits may be a good compromise. It's not an ideal compromise because clearly it's outside of the watershed. And so, you know, I don't know, the only thing I'd like to see is maybe something else to be offered within this watershed. But beyond that, I think it's a decent compromise. That's pretty much my thought.
Yeah, this is Ann. I don't have another question, but I support what Chris just said and Tom said earlier. Really wanting to make sure that the 1-for-1 is satisfactorily met to protect the city's environmental eco zones. But yeah, I support what Chris just said. And that's the last thing I have.
So Chris, are you making that a motion? Or would you like to make that a motion?
I don't know. I want to allow other people to talk if there's questions or comments or concerns. But clearly we got to get through the agenda, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think motions can be made and then usually discussion about those motions take place after the motions are made so that people can get into a discussion of the merits of that motion. But we may not be ready for that too. So I don't want to put you on the spot, Chris, but just for clarity, we don't just vote, boom, and run. We can discuss it after a motion's made.
Okay. Okay, I guess I'll motion to support the compromise of purchase of mitigation banking credits for satisfying the city's ordinance on mitigation requirements.
Second. Over there.
Just to clarify, that motion was to support the I guess the wetland credits as they are right now? Or did you add something to the end?
Yeah, no, I didn't add to that. And that's good. I'm glad you said that, because I would like to see something like I said, I don't know if it would be possible for the developer to offer like a conservation easement for existing properties, existing wetland resources that they hold within this watershed. They very well may have properties where they have no intention of developing certain wetland resources. And but if those properties are sold, then somebody else can come up with different plans for those wetland resources.
Mm-hmm.
A conservation easement attaches it to the deed, and it's in theory, it's a perpetual protection. So it's not creation of wetland resources, but it's more of a preservation. And so I'm not saying that equates the mitigation banking that they've proposed. I think that's in a way better because it's creating wetland. But, if it was the mitigation bank credits they propose plus preserving a little bit within this watershed, that would I think that'd be a lot better, proposal.
We do not have any other property available that would meet that description currently.
Okay, thank you.
So well, John, let me get some clarity. Kathy had asked about the properties being split up and there's a bunch of wetlands more than you thought that have been identified. Those properties don't belong to that same developer. Those are someone else's properties.
No, they do belong to the same developer.
You said you weren't planning to develop those wetlands to request any permits. So could some portion of those be put into a conservation easement?
I am sure that they could, but that is not currently our interest in doing so. We have not discussed it. We've not looked at it. But at the same time, conservation, I'm not sure that conservation easements can count toward mitigation.
Right. What I think what Chris is saying is the mitigation you proposed in the potentially different watershed would stand. And in addition, in order to have something meaningful happen within the city, that some area of conservation easement would be added to it in these areas that they're currently not planning to do anything with anyways.
I can say that we are not planning on doing anything. I can't speak for future landowners, and I would be hesitant to encumber a developable property with that easement at the moment, even given the location of the existing wetlands. We don't think that further dividing the parcel or preventing development on those parts of the parcel would be beneficial at the moment.
Okay. What about, thinking still on the lines of what Chris said, there's wetlands on this property that you're not developing. Could those be put into a conservation easement? Is that, this is the current property?
I don't think at the moment, I don't think that we're interested in doing that. As the developer, I can say that currently we're not necessarily interested in doing that. And further, what would be the acceptable extent of this? I mean, is it 1/10 of an acre, 1/4 of an acre, 1/2 of an acre? Certainly the amount matters.
Sure.
If it's just for, some sort of, blood for the city, then I don't believe that we're interested in doing that. If it's symbolic, I fail to see what purpose it serves. If it's large enough to be beneficial, again, I'm not sure that we're willing to do that.
Well, it's not blood and it's not symbolic, but it would be protecting resources. That's the idea, is to protect the resource. So, but I hear you, you're asking for a criteria and a number. I'm not sure that we have that.
And I understand your point, absolutely. And I was being slightly facetious when I said blood. But we also, as we explained to Eagle and as we've mentioned in our permit applications, we've gone to great lengths to limit impacts. We've gone to lengths greater than what other developers may in a similar situation and probably could still get a permit for. So it isn't as if we've come to this and said, we need this tiny amount of wetland. We started with a much greater amount, an amount that probably could have been permitted. And we would have had the right to permit this larger amount, but we, as the developer, have taken steps that are costly to us. The subsurface detainment system, the rerouting of the driveway at the loss of future developable land, those things begin to add up. And so it's not as if we're coming to you with nothing else in hand, having done nothing else. We've taken considerable steps to limit impacts on this parcel and feel that our mitigation proposal is very fair and certainly reasonable.
I just have a question for Kathy. What is, if we said no to this, what are the options?
So let's say you were to make a motion to say we want more than what is being offered, or we are not interested in
The bank?
The bank, because it's not in the same watershed, and we don't believe that all opportunities have been exhausted within the watershed and within this property. You could certainly say that and ask for them to come back with a different proposal. I believe that their site plan approvals have been tied to this review and approval. They always have the option of appealing any decision that's made, and they can appeal that
Okay.
Both to your body and to the city council. So there is.
Okay.
I just want to give everyone a quick heads up. We have a little bit less than 13 minutes to wrap this all up.
Thank you. I was thinking the same lines. Kathy, there's a motion.
Are we back to the original motion, or did we modify that motion?
I don't think the motion was modified. I think I think there's just discussion about this idea of conservation easement and anything else that could be added to address the resources within the watershed. I guess I'll move forward with the motion to approve the purchase of mitigation banking credits to satisfy the city's mitigation ordinance requirements.
I like the way our discussion was going with, an interest in doing something locally. So I would want to know if the body be interested in putting some conditions on that approval, that there be some additional things done locally, whether that be mitigation on site, shovel the dirt type mitigation, or conservation easement on site, or similar type of activity done within the watershed on another site within the watershed. And really, we're looking at protection of city wetlands, 1-to-1 ratio. And I think that's the way I see the ordinance set up. And I want to make sure we hold up that ordinance. That's really one of the purposes of this body.
And is that in addition to already doing the offsite credits, or is that just in itself?
I'm really not dictating what needs to be done. I'm just thinking that something needs to be done locally, and I'm giving examples.
Okay.
Would you like to revise the motion to some degree? Does somebody have some language that you would like to add to that motion to include Michael's suggestion of a local solution? Potentially something is specific enough for the developer to work with, but general enough to allow for a variety of options potentially.
I think, well, we need to clarify, I guess, what we mean by what we want locally. I mean, do we want to just, because I mean, I guess you could do a lot of things, like you could do educational component stuff too, or do we want things that are like physically done to the land?
I was just speaking about physical mitigation or a conservation easement, because those were the things that have been discussed today with some clarity. The other things I think have merit and have been considered on other sites. So, but those are things we've been discussing today.
Yeah, I think the physical ones make the most sense. But I guess I wouldn't be more familiar with anything besides the conservation easement or doing, I guess, mitigation on site. I don't know if there's other options that could be explored.
I think we've heard John say that there weren't options within the watershed, within the glass watershed, but that I don't know how well that was explored. That would be for John to explain.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
I guess, are there other opportunities, like you mentioned how there wasn't any credits on the Looking Glass watershed, how they're kind of designated to kind of those road authorities. Is there anything besides credits that could be done as far as mitigation in the Looking Glass watershed?
Not that counts as actual mitigation, no.
Okay.
And I would submit that the drainage from this site goes into the same watershed that the bank is in. The Moore branch of the Remy Chandler drain, which is what we discharge into, flows directly into the Looking Glass watershed.
So then I would think that we would be limited to adding, either look into a conservation easement on site or look into additional or even any mitigation practices on site, given our limitations of what John has kind of been telling us.
And so, John, there's no opportunity for offsite actual mitigation, besides not banking credits, but building a wetland not on this site. You don't have any other properties where that could take place.
No, unfortunately, we do not. And again, that would get back to when we look at the total cost of mitigation. It isn't necessarily the only driver, but that carries the same price as mitigating on site. Perhaps if we had 100 acres of rural land somewhere in southern Clinton County, then yes, I could answer in the affirmative to that. But we don't possess any vacant land that would be more suitable for this.
And so one additional maybe suggestion I would have is, the online map or the online resource for looking at available mitigation credits. You might just want to also check with to make sure that's fully updated. And I'm sure your consultant would know how to do that. But if you want to go straight to the source, the specialists at the state of Michigan could probably give you the best up-to-date information. The online resource may not be the most up-to-date.
It is current as of 10 days ago for the Wetland Bank, updated July 10th, 2020.
Okay, thanks.
Just want to give everyone a quick reminder. We have about 5 minutes.
Thanks, Nicole.
So I don't know how this works. I introduced a motion. It sounded like Mike wanted to see something a little different. So I don't know, do we vote on my motion or do I yield to Mike? How does this work?
I was mostly just amending yours to add a condition to it. I wasn't trying to start a new motion.
Okay.
So we would be looking at an amended motion, right, Kathy? What do you have down for that amended motion?
For the motion, I have that the commission would support the purchase of mitigation banking credits as offered by the developer to satisfy the city's mitigation requirements. So an amended version of this would add some language that Michael has brought up in terms of a local solution, potentially something like that, or you would go with just the motion as is. But we would need to kind of nail down that language.
Yeah, I mean, this is tough because we're going on an unprecedented venture here outside, potentially, well, definitely outside of the city and off the property into a potentially different watershed. But it sounds like it's the only thing that's really reasonable or even feasible at this point, from the developer's perspective.
You say that some of the hesitation is the concern for precedent setting in that you've not done this previously. And so
Correct.
I feel like there's a little bit of a concern amongst commissioners that if we say that this is okay, then every development coming forward may say, well, that's what we want to do. And I see some concern amongst you that that there's hesitation there.
Certainly.
It's not in our watershed and it's not typical of what we've done with mitigation in the past. And so I think there's potential for you to write into that motion that this is not precedent setting in future cases would be considered again with the priority of mitigation, no net loss of wetlands, all of those things. Just one thought that I have, you know.
I agree with that one.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. I think that's important. Certainly, every site review is site specific, and we take these considerations. You know, they're all unique sites, so I think that would be important to put into the motion that this does not mean that everybody can buy banking credits outside of the watershed, and that would be fine.
But I mean, even if you write that it's not precedent setting, I mean, it's still going to be something that people are going to refer to in the future, right, that we did this.
People,
so I don't know.
People can push, but you know, I don't know.
Still our call at that point, though, right? I mean, so if there's precedent, but it still comes before this board, so yeah, it would still be the final say.
If we settle on this, what makes us not settle in the future, I guess?
This is a pretty good compromise, and you do have to pick your battles. I do know that from quite a bit of experience in fighting legal battles. I'm a little concerned about some of what the developer has said here. I'm going to keep those thoughts private, but I'll just say that I don't like some of the language that they've used, this arbitrary and capricious language. I just don't think that's fair, number one. And that's kind of code language for them saying that they might be willing to sue, which is not good. And that could be a big draw on city resources. I do think this is a decent compromise, and that's about, I think, the best I can say.
Yeah, we're burning on time here. And so I hate to even throw it out there, but, you know, Kathy has said before, we've required more than 1-to-1 on a number, or we've received or gotten more than 1-to-1 on a lot of these. They're offering essentially 1-to-1, maybe a skidge more, but it's like, well, could we just ask them to bank more because it's outside of the city? And then we're setting a precedent that, yeah, you can bank outside, but it's going to have to be more than just 1-to-1. You know, I think we're almost out of time, like probably out of time. So we need to vote on this motion.
Well, I would support Tom's position too. I know I offered up earlier that they could do mitigation on site or do a conservation easement on site, but I do see some merit in doing a larger ratio off-site if that would be another thing that would be acceptable to the developer. I think any three of those things could be conditions of approval of this permit, just kind of giving it back into the developer's hands and saying, what would you propose? I don't want to tell them what to do, but give them some options and which of those three conditions, on-site mitigation, conservation easement, or a higher ratio off-site, would be acceptable.
Okay. So Kathy, do you have all that down in the motion?
So under the conditions of approving this, I have one condition be that it not be precedent setting. I have one condition be that they could opt for a larger ratio, and I kind of need you to set something that would be a minimum in that larger ratio. Are you talking about, we're looking at 0.248, is that correct? I don't have it correctly.
Correct.
So, you know, what you would think that that is. So consider that. And then another condition would be a conservation easement. And another condition would be a local on-site mitigation.
Yeah.
To a 1-to-1. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, I think it was just three conditions, not the condition of it not being precedent setting. I think that was supposed to apply to any one of those things. I think there were three possible conditions. I thought you rattled those off great, but I think the non-precedent setting, I think, was applied to whatever outcome we had.
Could I,
That's why.
as the applicant, could I make an offer since we're at this point? We would offer a ratio of 1.5 to 1, which would be 0.372 acres of mitigation within the bank. 1.5 to 1 is a relatively standard accepted ratio for on-site or off-site mitigation for wetlands of this type. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, I would ask the commission, do you want to continue to include those conditions that we just discussed, or do you want the motion to read that that you support the purchase of mitigation banking credits at a 1.5 to 1, 0.372 bank credits purchased as mitigation for this site?
I like the former.
Yeah, I think the 1.5 to 1 makes sense.
So if the language is 1.5 to 1, and we could take a vote on this motion to say whether this can pass then.
That sounds good. So all in favor?
I
Give a second on the
Oh.
motion.
Yeah, I'll second it, Kathy.
Sorry.
Sorry, moving too fast, trying to get us on schedule because we're already over. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? I think that does it.
I will get this written formally and make sure you get a copy of it so you can see the language.
Excellent. And I think at this point, we need a motion to,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Thank you, everybody.
thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
For the good work, guys. Thank you. Good night.
Have a good time with the rest of your meetings.
Oh, joy.